So today in class we're going to be tackling this really big question: how was all of the diversity on Earth generated after life originated? And you can imagine life starting as a single cell, but then resulting in this diversity of life ranging from these plants with really different morphologies, these different types of animals, and we're really going to be digging into how to explain and answer this big question today. So in thinking about populations, this is the level we need to think about. We need to think beyond the level of an individual organism and think to these groups of organisms in the same species. And one of the organisms that we have nearby in our Appalachian National Forest is the loblolly pine. And you can see examples of this tree and some of their reproductive structures and their leaves. But if you were to go out and walk in the forest, you would actually notice that these pines can be quite different from each other, even though they're all part of the same species. And we call these pines a population. They're all of the organisms of one species in one area that are capable of interbreeding. So I want you guys to work now in groups, looking at these different types of trees. What are some characteristics that you might be able to quantify in this population? Take a moment right now and jot down for yourself independently for about 1 minute different characteristics that you see among these different loblolly pine trees. And then we'll take a moment to discuss.
In elementary school or something. How about looking at this?
So we're going to come back up front and just share out some of the characteristics that we've identified that we think we might be able to quantify. And I'm going to press you to ask, how are you going to quantify that, to see if that's something that we might be able to quantify. So let's start with our group here. What did you guys come up with?
One of them was where the branches started on the tree.
Where the branches started on the tree, and how would you quantify that?
We could measure from the base of the tree up to where the first branch starts.
The base of the tree up into where the first branch starts. Yeah, and so we can imagine measuring that in terms of a length. This group, what did you guys come up with?
We also had that one.
Okay,
but
good.
in relation to that, we also noted that like some of the trees looked like they were more bushy almost than others, and so maybe not just where the branches start is on the trunk, but where the bristles, like the pine bristles, start on the branches.
So bushiness,
So
and you are thinking of quantifying from the base of the trunk out to the first
right,
leaf.
because that seems to be a lot more sparse, for instance, than that. There's like, it's bushy.
So the bushiness. Is there another way that you guys can think of to quantify that bushiness character? So one idea is going from the base of the trunk out. Are there other ideas that you guys have for quantifying that bushiness character?
We thought about the number of branches.
Quantifying the number of branches, so you could even take a branch and count them off.
Seems like in both of those cases we might have to do some ratios or something.
Ratios, can you tell me more?
Well, so, because I think like if you're looking at where the branches start in relation to the trunk, the entire height of the tree probably matters, right? And so you would want to do that in relation to the entire height of the tree, and the same with the bushiness.
So you're thinking about bushiness both in terms of the density of leaves within the tree, it sounds like, but also in terms of the proportion of the tree in terms of height.
Yeah.
That's characterizing it. Wonderful. And so you guys can see, like, as biologists, we might be going out, and one of the first steps we often do as ecologists is go out and characterize populations. We think about which traits we're interested in that we think might have some sort of relevance. Perhaps bushiness is important for the amount of photosynthesis that a tree can do. And then we have to devise a way to go out and quantify this in populations. And it's by studying these patterns in populations that then we can get a sense of what might be happening over time. And so now I'm going to show you or tell you a little bit more about evolution. And so this is placing this in a context that's not just thinking about a population at a single time, but looking at populations, variation in populations through time. And so evolution is just changes in allele frequencies over time. And we haven't gone much into the genetics yet with this lesson, so I'm going to say what that means to us is that we're thinking about changes in distribution of a trait. So we could be thinking about changes in the bushiness character in these trees, or changes in the height of the tree, like some of you guys had mentioned. And you can imagine that in a population such as this population of beetles. If there was this black crow that loved eating the green beetles, you can imagine that through time we would see a change in the distribution of the color of trait for these beetles, and we would expect to see an increase in the number of the orange beetles over time. Now I'm going to show you a quick simulation. This is a population of colored dots, and I've narrated the video, so we'll jump right into the video.
Okay, I'm going to run this simulation of a population of dots. You can see that we have different colors of dots, and there are different numbers of dots with these different colors. I also notice here that the different dots have different speeds. I'm going to put 15 seconds on the timer, 20 seconds on the timer, and run the simulation. And right now I'm clicking the dots as quickly as I can, and I notice as I'm clicking them, they are disappearing. Okay, I'm gonna stop, that's my timer. And here's our new distribution of the population, and I am going to hit reproduce, and I see that each dot reproduced, and I'm going to hit run again.
Predator?
Gosh.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good question.
All the slow ones are disappearing.
And I have another distribution of the population. And if I kept running this, I want you to write down, what do you predict would happen? What changes would we see in our population?
Right. Let's come back up front and let's just tackle this first question. So if I kept running the simulation, what do you think would happen to the population over time? Yeah, Melanie?
It would change. The blue would disappear. For example,
you
I
predict
predict that the
blue.
blue would disappear. Yeah. 'Cause
Why
the,
is that?
the purple disappear? Well, you see from the starting population, the blue was really high, and then on the second time, it seems like they were all eaten. So I can see their numbers are decreasing, whereas, for example, the yellow continues to stay.
Do you think we'll ever see a loss of the green?
No, I mean,
Maybe.
but not. But over time, like really over time, I feel like it would take a long time.
So what do you think best explains the decrease in the blue dots and the purple and the black?
Probably the speed. They were moving slower, so they were easier to click.
They were easier to click. Is there a speed at which you think they're fast enough to avoid the predator?
I guess the green.
Yeah.
Can you
Yeah.
imagine
Is that
a
like a
situation
change?
or think of a way that maybe the green might start to decrease through time?
If you got better at clicking.
If I got better at clicking, so what happens if the predator changes in response to this change in the population? And so you can imagine that maybe the green might start decreasing in response to a predator becoming faster. We also had a nice conversation up here about color. Bobby noticed that color initially, she thought maybe it was just the color, certain colors were easier for me to see, and that's why I was clicking them. Can you tell us more about that?
I was thinking of it kind of like if you have white and brown rabbits in a snowy area, then the predators are going to eat the brown rabbits that stand out in the snow more than they would eat the white rabbits. So I was thinking maybe like yellow on white is harder for her to see or something like that.
And
But it was their skin.
And what I really liked was that when Bobby presented this idea, Micaiah noted that, well, the rabbits might also need to be a certain speed to get away from the predator. And so maybe it's this interaction between two different traits in the population, both the color and the speed, that might influence what distributions we see. And so we're going to